Hey everyone, we are back today with our daily word of push talk, and of course I have Brian with me.
Yes, sir. How you doing, Mr. Sean?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. We talked yesterday, man. We had a good conversation. And it's just so crazy. I watched the news last night, and what you talked about is pretty much going everywhere now.
Yeah, it happened big time last night.
Yeah.
Big time, yeah. So last night, as you probably seen, the Senate couldn't even come to a conclusion to even debate. Um, I forgot what they call it in the Senate, but I think it's S1. But basically, it's the For the People Act.
Okay.
I mean, they wouldn't even hold the conversation about it. And it just tells you kind of like how screwed up our politics is. You know what I'm saying? Like where we can't go to the floor and debate.
So they pretty much just said we see you out there talking, and we don't got nothing to say to you. Our decisions made.
Basically, yeah, we have nothing to say to you. We don't think that is an issue. And even if you don't think it's an issue, my thing is that even if you, for those who don't think it's an issue, right? For those who don't believe that voter suppression is an issue or whatever the case may be, at least people know how to have a conversation. Yeah. And that is kind of what I want to talk about today because you know me. One of the things I'm really big about is that I love having conversations with people who fundamentally disagree with me. Right?
That's why we're good friends.
Yeah, I mean because I think that for me it's humbling for me. So one of the things that I've done this year is that I've been going around talking to people literally who I know don't agree with me. Like I'm searching for people who don't agree with me, so that I can kind of have an insight into their world.
Correct.
And our politics have become so toxic that they don't even want to hold discussions anymore. You feel what I'm saying? Like, and that's not what politics is all about. Back in the old days, like they used to be able to go into rooms and hash it out, have their conversation and come to agreements. Now it's like, depending on who's in office, like remember, like Republicans were when Donald Trump was in office, they did everything. They got rid of the filibuster, they pushed judges through without the filibuster. And they did things, right? They were active. Now that President Biden's in office, it's kind of like they just said, screw it, we're not going to do anything. And they haven't signed on to anything he's done. I mean, even right now, they're trying to debate infrastructure, and that's become a big deal. The George Floyd Act, which I'm a big advocate of, right? Everybody agrees that something needs to be done to rein in police and what they're able to do. Can't even they haven't come to a conclusion on it yet. And the goal was to try to have it done for a year from the day he was killed last year, and couldn't get it.
So what's the next step? Like you said last night, nothing went through. They don't want to talk about it. So what's the next step?
All they can do is that. So from one side, the Democrat side, the person right now who really holds the most power is a senator named Joe Manchin because he doesn't believe that the filibuster needs to be gotten rid of.
Okay.
The only way the Democrats or anybody's going to be able to do anything is that to get rid of filibuster and just make it to where it's a majority vote, right? So I know Chuck Schumer said last night he's going to try to bring it to the floor again, but if we don't do anything about it, it's going to be exactly the same thing. It's going to get shot down and nothing to be done. So we'll see. We'll see.
I mean, like you said, it's just so cold-hearted. Like, okay, so what do we stand at now, though? Like, as a people, or people that don't believe in what they passing, what's next? What do we do next?
So as people, like we have to get out, and one of the things that we was talking about last week when we were in DC, it's kind of like voting our interests, right? We have to get out and start voting for people who stand for what we stand for, right? One of the things that I hate is that when I go out, I was in Texas like a month ago. I think we did a show when I was in Texas. Oh no, the second time I was in Texas. Yeah. But I was in Texas and I was talking to this group of young men. It's about 50 of them, right? And they were like, what do we do next, right? And I told them you got to get out and advocate for the things that you believe in. You got to find people who advocate for the things you believe in. One of the things that's interesting, like I told you, I think yesterday, is that we're having meetings with people who are Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everybody who's running for office right now. I have a whole list of them, and I'm trying to meet with every single one of them. Tomorrow, I think I got to meet with a lady who's running for judge in Cobb County, right? It's to be able to know what they stand for and to know, like, if that person matches your platform, right? You got to vote your interest because a lot of times we complain about people who are not doing what we want them to do or doing what we feel like they should do, but we didn't go out and vote for the person who kind of aligns with our interests. So that's going to be a big thing. Advocating, picking up the phone, calling your senator, right? Calling Senator Warnock, calling Senator Ossoff, but at the same time calling Joe Manchin, calling Mitch McConnell, calling all those Republicans, all the 50 Republicans that said no, this doesn't even need to be brought to the floor to have a debate about it.
Yeah, but you just said they're not going to hear us, so I mean.
But it's power in numbers, right? So politics is all about two things: numbers and money, right? If they see a lot of people signing on to it, it moves people.
Okay.
One person calling me, one of you calling ain't probably gonna work. But if you can get 1 million people to start blowing their phones up and they're starting to hear it's the same issue they're calling about, that makes a difference, and that starts to get their attention.
But you would think when they made that decision, they knew what would come with it.
They do.
So they probably prepared for the phone calls to go to a different direction or not be heard. Like,
yeah, it's all politics.
Yeah,
man, it's
yeah.
all politics. I mean, they just it's all politics. One of the things that I find interesting that I'm trying to kind of shift from is that understanding the game, man. We got our problems that we're always like 10 feet behind, right? We're never we're never one step ahead. We're never 2 steps ahead. We're always like 10 steps behind, right? How do we change that philosophy? How do we get ahead of the game versus always being behind the game? Those are things that's going to be really important. And once again, like, it's advocating. It's finding groups out there. There's a lot of groups out there that are fighting for these issues, right? It's finding those groups and advocating with them. I mean, making a donation to the organization. Just being involved, right? When we went to DC last week, most people didn't even notice. The group we went with, they paid for a charter bus. And if you were willing to get on the charter bus and take a 10-hour ride, a 12-hour ride to DC, you got a free ride to DC. And you got a free ride back. You know what I'm saying? Being on that bus, that makes a difference, right? There's power in numbers.
but yeah, it's just cold hearted, man. Like people got the freedom of speech and can contest and go against stuff. But now you get to the front door. Look here, man. It is what it is. Bye.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing about it. Like, I remember like a month and a half ago, I was having this meeting with someone, these group of people, and it was like, policy, you can change policy, but you can't change people's hearts, right? And I fundamentally disagree, right? Yes, we need to change people's hearts, right? We need to change people's hearts on these issues. But if we change policy, whether or not they like their heart is with it or not, policy is policy, right? So, I mean, you think about even the 14th and 13th Amendment, right? That set African Americans free from being slaves, right? Most people didn't like it. They didn't care. But the reality was policy superseded how you felt, right? We have to get to the point of changing policy. I use a perfect example. There was a young man that got killed by a police officer, right? And I was invited to go view video and go through the process of what they did to the grand jury, right?
I remember.
And the one conclusion I left with is that even though I felt like the young man should not have been killed, the reality was policy justified the killing, right?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And that's the problem, right? So we have to change those policies that justify that. We have to get the George Floyd bill passed. We have to, like, for our example, you know, our organization is working on something called the Fair Justice Act. And if anybody wants to go out there and give your input, go to www.blackpush.org, and we have it on there. But I mean, we've been talking to DAs, we've been talking to judges. We've been really working behind the scenes to make sure that we are building a coalition of people who can actually who give the insight into it too. So we've been talking to regular people. We just got a message, I think today, from a person who wanted to meet with us about their opinion on what we should do with the Fair Justice Act. So those are things that we're working on. Those are things that we have to continue to work on, and those are things that we won't stop working on, regardless of what happens.
Cool. So we talked about it yesterday, and it came on the news last night. Just that quick.
Yeah, I mean, and it's
just that quick. I watched. I said we just talked about that about 5 hours.
And it's interesting though. The crazy part is, like, these are people's lives, man.
Yes.
These are people's lives, and when you restrict a person, when you try to restrict a person from being able to vote, you're impacting their life in ways you don't even understand.
I think because we talked about it, like everybody didn't vote, we thought our vote ain't matter. I think a lot of that had to do with them trying to make that decision, because to them, we never felt like voting would make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like they feel like, you know what? It's so many of them that don't vote versus that do vote. So us throwing it out there, we be fine.
But the biggest thing is that last year we voted.
Exactly.
And that was the problem.
And that's why they came back out
And
with it now.
that was the problem. The problem is
Yeah.
not that there's issues with voting, because remember, these laws, prior to the new laws they're trying to pass, the laws that were around on voting were around for years, right? Years, centuries, I mean, hundreds, like 100 years, right? The problem is that we got out and voted, right? So, I mean, you think about even when we got our right to vote, right? When we got our right to vote, they would go, you go to Alabama, you try to vote, they'll be like, guess how many beans in this cup, right?
And we'll get the top two can vote.
Right. And stuff that we knew we couldn't do, right? Every single time as an African American, and this is for me, and this should offend everybody, right? It should offend white Americans, it should offend Asian Americans, it should offend Hispanic Americans, because as the democracy or republic, whichever one you want to call us, the one fundamental thing that we should all have a right to is the right to vote, right? The problem is that it seems like every single time we get out and vote in numbers, they go back and they try to find ways to make it harder for us, right? And that's just the reality of it. So we had laws in place in a lot of states that said that once a person was a felon, once they served their time, they had to wait another 5 years on top of that in order to get their rights back. After they served their time, meaning after they completed their probation, after they paid off all their fees, they had to wait another 5 years. So states now have gotten into the place where they're saying, you know what, no, once a felon has served their time, they deserve to have their rights restored, right? So now we got to make it harder, right? Now we got to do something to change that, because most of the people who are felons, 50% of the jail system and prison system is filled with minorities. What's a minority? Me and you,
Yeah.
right? 50%. So imagine that, right?
So you take their rights away. That's already you already halfway there.
You already have
More than halfway there.
Yeah. So I mean that's the thing about it. We just got to look at the reality, and we got to be able to see the new Jim Crow.
And then the reality is we got to get our young folks not to get in that system so early.
Yeah.
Because we always grew up hearing from my people, both sides, Cuban and blacks, that it's easy to get in the system and it's so hard to get out.
It is.
So we got to get these young boys to get more focused on not getting that system, because it's going to be a domino effect on everything else in your life.
And I would say this, right? So thinking about even, you and I both stay in Cobb County here in Georgia. Even thinking about Cobb County, right? We have gotten some good judges in this last election, right? We got to get more, right? Because just having 2 good judges in there doesn't change the heart of the other.
Well, not only that, we got to keep them out of it. They don't have to face a judge.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that even though we still need to have people in that place
That can just
to
kind
where
of
when they're
understand.
there,
Yeah.
they actually understand that the person that they're looking at is a person.
Well, we got somebody we just elected. I know we're gonna bump heads with that. I won't put his name out there. I don't think he's gonna do nothing. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I think he was more talk than anything. I think me and Greg is on the same decision. Who I'm talking about.
I
Same
think I know what you're
feelings.
talking about.
I think it's more just I wanted your vote. I'm gonna get in, but I'm still gonna put the whipstick on my own people.
Right.
That's where I'm at with it.
And
I'm watching.
And I'll say this too: just because they have a black face doesn't mean that they're black priorities, right?
Correct.
But neither should they be. I would say that too, right?
Well, right is right, wrong is wrong.
Right, right is right,
Because-
wrong is
yeah.
wrong, right? So even like one of the things I disliked when President Obama got in the White House, people were upset because it was like he was not pro-black, right? He was the president of the United
Yeah.
States. I mean, his job was to be the president of Asian Americans,
Correct.
Hispanic Americans, Black Americans, white Americans. He was the president of the United States, right? We couldn't expect him to go in there with a Black Panther sign, you know what I'm saying, holding up.
Yeah.
That's not who he was. This is not, I mean, you know what I'm saying? That's not what we should have expected from him.
Well, my
Sometimes
point
we put
is
too much on our
correct.
elected
Well, my point
officials.
is the dude sat right here in this chair, and he said, "I'm gonna put on table that if my minority child could put in the yard, he'll get hit just with trespassing. That's it. Versus getting hit with loitering, trespassing, breaking the entry, all the stuff added to it. Versus the white child going in the yard, or he just got lost. That's what he said he's gonna put in place. He said he's gonna put in place a lot of minor crimes thrown out. So I'm curious to know the stats from when he got elected last year to now
Yeah.
on how much stuff been thrown out.
A lot has changed, and we'll talk about it tomorrow because we may agree on more things than we think.
That's good stuff.
I think that, and I'll say this before we end for the day. Like, I believe that like a car that's messed up, right? If you take the car to the auto shop and they say you need a new engine, but you say to them like, hey, I can't afford a new engine right now. What can I do to just get through, right? And you can change the parts on it, but ultimately you're going to need a new engine. And a lot of people who we have elected are trying to change the parts, but they're not trying to place the entry.
Again, I'm not saying, I'm thinking the person we're talking about tomorrow. I think that person has the engine, the car, the steering wheel, the tires. I just feel like it was something that was placed as a bait for his own people to elect him, but he's still gonna do what what everybody expect him to do.
I think we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Perfect.
I think
And I won't put his name out there tomorrow, but I think we know what we're talking about.
We'll definitely know.
But I do agree with Greg on how Greg feels towards that. So I will say that.
I'll give my opinion tomorrow.
Cool.
But thank you guys for joining us today. We will be back tomorrow at 1:00. We had a few things going on today, but we look forward to being back tomorrow. I do want to throw this out there too for everybody who follows our podcast. We now have an app that's out on Android and on Android and Apple. So it's on the Google Play Store and it's also on the Apple Store. It's just type in Black Push or Black Push Incorporated. Download our app. We have a contest right now for the person who gets the most people to sign up. You can win a $250 Visa gift card. So don't forget to sign up. More information to be on our Facebook page. Check it out.